actually negative 5 minutes. Well, you can get up and leave whenever you want, but there could be gold that's said during that period of time. You never know. All right, so if I remember correctly, let's launch this real quick. I think we have our player doubled up, right? Is it because players are getting saved to the database? Because I remember looking at the database and it looked like the database was correct, but I might not have expanded each room. So let's take a peek. Just want to make sure that it's still the double up thing. All right, so we're currently in S120. And if I hit north, you see, I did just hit it. So I'm going to go west. Yeah, I'm still in CS hallway. Yeah, so there's 2 players. What I want to do here is I want to look for, here's in build dungeon. I want to make sure I'm not programmatically adding the player more than once. I am, and I'm adding it every single time. This, yeah. So really what we need to do is give ourselves like a private variable up here. Private Boolean is player added. Set that equal to false. Then down here, when we go to add the player, we'll say if not is player added. We'll add the player. And then we'll say this dot is player. Oh, can't do the this dot. We would have to do our main. In fact, I'm going to do that. I like being explicit. That and that and that. All right, run. Why is this faster? Why is it faster to write it that way than to write it this way, even though in this case both of them work? Okay, it's not the compiler, but basically, right, it's at runtime. Yeah, so when I say is player added here like this, even though it works, the very first thing it does is it looks within this class right here and says, is there a variable in there with that name? Because all variables resolve to their most local definition. When it doesn't find that, it bounces up to the next scope. And then it happens to find it up there. When I explicitly say, look in main activities instance pointer, which was my synonym for this, because I got a brand new this inside of here. When I say this inside of this highlighted code, you can see it's hard to teach this without saying this. It's one of those things. But when I use the this keyword inside of the highlighted code, that version of this refers to the instance of value event listener, as opposed to the instance of main activity that we have up here, which is why we gave ourselves this extra pointer thing, which already is making us do a double lookup anyways, because it's looking for main activity instance pointer locally and then bouncing up. So actually in this particular case, I guess pun intended, this approach actually is not faster than that approach. It's the same. Because when I use it this way, it's going to look for main activity instance pointer locally. When it doesn't find it, it's going to then go to the next scope, find it there, and then use that guy to go ahead and map to is player added. So I'm still having to do one extra lookup. just because of the nature of what's going on here. So it's a tie. So in this particular case, we might say, this just helped me not have a spelling error here. Something like that.
A lot of IDEs right now like try to hint you into not use this.
Yeah,
I don't know. I understand how you
yeah.
use it.
And it's possible. This is possible that the IDE itself, when it goes to compile, it goes through and strips the this dot, or adds the this dot to your code for performance, but encourages you not to have to type it for convenience. That's kind of the direction like the Swift programming language went, where they said, we want you to type less characters if possible. So I guess with that in mind, it's possible they want you to type less, but they still put it back in later for performance.
More readable if there's a this.
I think so, but yeah, I mean, but it is what it is. Most of the, I guess we're really seeing this exaggerated recently, and this has more to do with, I think, the curly brace thing. Like my formatting for curly braces, I use them left justified. And so I'm teaching a bunch of students, we're doing VR programming with Unity 4 days a week. They're just interested in it, so they volunteered their time, and I'm coming in and teaching it to them. And we're following along the same video that you're looking at, okay? And the guy does, when he does the curly brace on the same line, and when you start getting a bunch of else ifs, it gets really messy, right? Where it looks a lot more structured when you have the things left justified. So even that one little change, pressing enter at the end of a line, makes a huge, huge difference in the readability of the code when things start getting,
You're not supposed to nest your F statements, right? Like, in general, you don't want to have a lot of nesting.
Well, not that deep, but it's pretty common to have an if this, else if this, else if this. Maybe the historic precedent would be if you get down to a certain level, if you have too many else ifs, then you probably should use a switch case statement. I'm not a huge fan of case statements. So I guess for that in mind, I think else ifs are pretty common. But I think what you're saying is when you have an if, and then inside of there you have another if, and then inside there you have another if, and you start getting, your 40 or 50, spaces indented. That probably gets a little ugly. But certainly having your curly braces like this showing you the beginning and end, as opposed to this, I think is more readable. As a one-off here, this isn't horrible. But if you had a whole bunch of those right next to each other, and at the end of this, he puts in like an else if, something like that. And then, something is player added. Then he puts that guy here and then something else there. I mean, this starts getting unreadable.
I don't know. I feel like it's way more organized like this.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, okay, it's certainly more compact, but I think it's less readable. Because now you're having to find, okay, where does this else if start? Starts here. Where does it end? It ends here. And if you had a whole bunch of lines of code in here, where this thing was off the screen, and you're up here, and then you go through this code, and then all of a sudden you hit this curly brace, you're not even sure where that, ended. Now, this guy does do the color coding thing, so it helps you, but I just think it makes it less readable, in my opinion. Okay, so our fix here is instead of having a player added every single time on data change gets called, only the first time if is player added is currently false. We'll go ahead and add the player, and then we'll flip it to true, so we'll never do that again. We still have two players.
I think it's something to do with the exit. Like they're not actually exiting.
Well, this definitely made a difference because even though we're seeing it differently here, when I go to move, he's actually moving. So I have a feeling I'm still adding another player somewhere. Actually, let's check the database real quick and make sure we're not storing players, because it might be that that player got read in from the database itself. He did. So if I delete this from here, and then we just need to go in and make sure players don't get saved. Yeah, we want NPCs to get saved, but not players. So let's run this again, and now we should only have one player. So before we had double problem. One problem was we were adding the player more than once, which is why I would hit the button and he wouldn't move anywhere. The second one is we were reading in the player from the database, and he was getting thrown into a room. That's why we would stumble upon him, because he was just in one of the rooms like an NPC might have been. Okay, looks like we're in good shape now. So now what we need to do is we need to make sure that players don't get saved with a room. So here is a room. We put exclude before that. That was our goal, right? Can we not exclude?
Maybe the function add player.
Do you think we need to exclude
Give players.
this function, get players? Get NPCs, get exits, get description, get name. And then you think add player 2? Anything that changes that we need to exclude? Remove player?
We spam all of them.
Okay, let's try that. So we'll go ahead and try to save this again. We actually can just save it right away. I don't think that's going to be a problem. So we saved it. Go into our database. Here's our room 0. Here's our room 1. Here's our room 2. Players did not seem to get saved. Good. Let's go and add a room. All right, so we already have to the west is Locklear's office. So now we can add an exit to the south, which is this room over here. VR room, right? So add exit to the south. Call it VR room. And we'll go ahead and save that. Then I'll save the entire database. We did see this last time that something changed here, right? Oh, interesting. It changed because we actually removed the player. We reread it in and we removed the player from our dungeon. So what we need to do is on that save button, we need to flip that add player back to true. Right? Because when we save, we'll actually throw the player back in the... We want to put the player back in their current room.
He doesn't supposed to leave. You add new one.
But we just... What's happening here is this. We are reloading. So it's this guy. Am I in main activity? No, I'm in room. This guy's getting called. So when I save, this guy's getting called. we are overwriting our dungeon with this brand new dungeon, right, that we just read in. We're saying, is the player already added? The answer for us is yes, the player has already been added. But since we just overwrote it, the player's room object is no longer the real room object. Because that was deleted, and now we have a new set of rooms, new instances of rooms, and things like that. So,
Well, you already excluded the player to be added in the database.
this is the simplest way of doing it. The simplest way of doing it would be this, and you could tell me whether you like this or not. So I'm going to go ahead, and when we hit the save button, I'm going to say this dot is player added is equal to false. I'm going to flip that back. So then what's going to happen is it's going to, then we're setting the value here, which will then ultimately call this code, which will then ultimately fill the interface. So what's going to happen is that when I add this VR room, for example, it's then going to the whole dungeon gets reset, right? It's then going to re-add me to the original room, the base room for this, and then fill the interface so I'll be in the CS hallway rather than in the room over here where I just added something new. So it won't leave me in place. Does that make sense? And I think that should be good because when we add the player, he has a current room index. Yeah, I think that'll work. So now when we run this, we'll already have the VR room because, I mean, our dungeon was built correctly. It just, we lost the pointer to our actual room when this happened.
Shouldn't it just update instead of like rewrite the whole thing, rewrite the whole object?
Well, you could say we can make it work that way, but the way we're doing it right now is we are literally overwriting the entire dungeon every single time something happens. Right there. Hold on. I'm lying. Right. Yeah, right here. We're creating a brand new dungeon with new room pointers, new exit pointers. I mean, they might look identical to what they were before in terms of their content, but they're new memory addresses. We might say this isn't the most efficient way of doing it. Probably the most efficient way would have been to kind of do it on an explicit where each room can update itself. Each exit can update itself. Things that we are storing in the database can update themselves on a one-off basis, where we can go in and change an individual exit to now be to the east instead of the south or something like that. You know, for time, let's not go back and do that, but we could make it that granular. You know, where a room has its database reference set to name of the database, rooms, 1, and that's him. So whenever something changes, he would create his own listener for changes that happen to him. Make sense? All right, so I think I already ran it, right? All right, so we have S120 as our starting room. That must be what it is. So I'll go to north, I'll go to west. We see a south here, so now we're in our VR room. We go to north, go to east. So now we're in the CS hallway, so we're right out here. So let's add an exit to the north. What are you gonna call this? CS hallway 2 or something? Kind of the second half of the CS hallway or something like that? Or do we want to just have us take us right to, was that what, S114? Is that the lab? Yeah, see, I don't like that because then we can't do the west to S118. So we'll do CS hallway 2. Second half of CS hallway. That's going to be to the north of right outside the door here, the first part of the CS hallway. We'll save that. Now I'll go ahead and hit save here. Notice it threw me back in S120. Brand new dungeon, loaded me back into the base dungeon. So now I should be able to go north. I should be able to go north again. I'm in the second half of the CS hallway. Go south, go west, go east. Okay, so there's the second half of the CS hallway. So now I'll add another exit. So now I have S114. Is that like a weird number, like S114D or something? Because is that room to the right, S114 something else? All right, we're just going to call it. Yeah, we're going to call this guy CS Lab. And we'll call this CS Lab for the description. That guy's going to be to the north. We'll save that. So, there's that CS Lab. I'll go back to the south. Now I'm going to add an exit. We'll call this what? Advanced. No, let's call it. Actually, what do we call that? Soda room? I think some people have called that. Well, but you gotta have the hallway. Yeah, but I call that VR room. So I'm gonna call that soda room, and then I'm gonna call that 3D printer room. All right. So and then we did that to the east. Fill that. So now I can head to the east here. Now we're in the soda room. Then I'm gonna add another exit to the north, and this guy's gonna be 3D printer room. 3D printers. Yeah. Yeah, so back through, what the sodas are? Back through there we have, huh? Yeah, but you have, some students have swipe access. The only ones we trust. Have you tried the swipe access? You might be able to get it.
If you're in 370, you can get in there.
Yeah. You might be able to get it there. You've just never tried it? We have some really cool 3D printers. We have a new one back there that can print things like that tall and that wide. Like completely legit 3D print. Say this again?
I need a new case for my Raspberry Pi.
Oh, you could easily print that. Yeah. I mean, if you can't get in there, we can try to get you in there. Send me the model and I'll print it for you. All right. Or I'll just get you access to there so you can go in and print it. 3D printer rooms, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so we'll save that. So now we're in the soda room. We can go north. There's our 3D printer room. South, west, north, CS Lab, south, CS Hallway 2. Oh, we need to add our S118, right? The other classroom. That's to the west. S118 classroom. Another classroom, and that's to the west. Save that. So now we can go to the west. There's one at S118. Technically in here we have a little north thing that takes us into that lab, but we have no way right now of actually linking to an existing room. We would have to create an identical lab, right? We can't select from an existing room in our current model, right? We don't have that ability. We could build it, but let's just assume that that's not how ours works right now. All right, so we decide, hey, we're happy with our whole department now. We go ahead and hit save. It throws us back in S120. There's north, there's west. This is actually technically supposed to be Dr. Locker's office, but it wasn't. Okay, so that kind of stuff. Make sense? So now the theory is we've updated our database here. So now I should be able to go and I should be able to open our Dungeons and Data Structures, our original app. And I should be able to launch this guy. And this is the one that shouldn't have the edit button or the new room button or the save button or any of that stuff. So it just looks like this. It starts me off in S120. I'll hit north, I'll hit west, I'll hit south. So now I'm playing our actual game here, and I can go through and there's the whole department that we actually built with the other app. Not too bad. So two separate apps that are using the same data source. One of them is kind of our administrator version that can make changes. The other one is the client version where they just get to experience your awesome dungeon. You don't seem thrilled.
We gotta add more NPC.
Oh yeah, so now we have to in our builder we have to create the ability to add an NPC, right?
We're not gonna randomize it.
Well, we could randomize it, but I think given how many days of class we have left, I think it'd be better to now we can make NPCs wander. So would that be acceptable? We place him in a starting room, like you're right here, buddy. But then from there, he gets a life of his own, where he can kind of wander from room to room, and maybe every some random period of time. Yep.
Where you allow calls to the database.
Yeah, possibly. But I mean, we would do it randomly. So that would allow us to kind of look at, because we've never looked at threads in Java, right?
No, we haven't.
All right, so that'll let us look at threads, which is another simple concept that you'll probably complain about. Yeah, asynchronous calls, right? Isn't that exciting? You don't seem excited.
Just
It's a
don't
major
want-
concept
because
in
you-
350.
Huh?
It's a major concept in 350.
Well, it should be, because threads are a major part of operating systems.
Yeah.
Okay.
Waiting for the information to be done is sometimes complicated.
Why?
I'm trying to do a JSON parser right now, and I have no idea why, but like I have to wait a little bit. I have to add a button just to keep clicking on it until the information comes out.
Oh, see, we shouldn't have this problem with Firebase, because Firebase is going to let us know when something was changed.
Oh,
Okay, so what's going to happen here? Actually, this is the way our current thing is going to work. It's going to be a little disorienting for the player, because every single time an NPC moves from one room to another, all of a sudden the player gets beamed back to the first room. It doesn't matter where he was, because the state of the database changed. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So
like the snapshot should actually just give you.
no, we should be dealing with it differently. We're dealing with it in a quick, convenient way. Yeah, we're saying, hey, you gave me the whole dungeon. I'm just going to overwrite mine. Yeah, because that's fast. Yeah, so, player better get where he wants to go quick and get his job done is what he has to do. If you're going to go and you want to get the treasure, you get there and you get the treasure. All right, we won't make him wander yet. Let's just get him into a room and then we'll make him wander, and that should be kind of a cool thing. And maybe our quick way of testing it will be, we'll have the player not move, and we'll put enough NPCs in the world where while the player's standing there, an NPC could wander into his room. Yeah, kind
How
of,
do we update the interface once that happens?
because our dungeon will be updated with a new NPC in the room,
Okay.
which calls fill interface.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we can look at how do you fix it if we have time to, because this isn't a horrible fix, just because of the way we've written this so far with wandering NPCs create an issue, whereas if our database is getting updated too often, or even once. Every time our database gets updated, we get fired back to our previous room. Now, actually, let's think about this for a second. Could we fix this? I think the answer is yes, because a player, he has a current room index.
Keep track of that.
Because the indexes should remain the same, right?
Yeah, before you fill out the interface, just say the.
So let me try something here then. So one thing I can do then is I can say inside of main activity, after we've added the player, we could ask the question if, now what does it start off at? Sorry. -1. Okay. If main activity pointer dot p dot it's not p?
Core.
Oh, core.p. We're storing him up there. Good. That's fast. Core.p.get current room. Is this going to return us a null if it was -1? Hopefully the answer to that is yes. Get current room, core dungeons rooms get. So we need to go to the dungeon. We need to go to rooms. We need to go to get. And we pass it the room index. What happens if we try to get a room from a, hopefully it gives me a null, but I don't necessarily have to rely on that. We can do this. If this dot current room index is equal to -1, return null. Otherwise, we'll return the actual room they're in. All right, so when a player tries to get their current room, if it gives them nothing, that means this is the first time we're adding the player to the world. Okay. Otherwise, I'm lost. All right. If it's not equal to null, and we need to do, I need to move this up top here. If it's not equal to null, we'll put them back in their old room. If it is equal to null, we'll put them in the main room. All right, so what was their old room? Their old room will be main activity pointer CS department dot add I need to have a way of getting a player into a, so I need to go to my dungeon. Where's dungeon? Here's our add player, which is automatically puts the player in the start room. So I should have a version of this called public void add player, player P, and then int room index. And this guy would say this dot rooms dot actually, we don't even need that. We can just hijack this. Core.p.get current rooms. That's the room he's currently in. Well, the room he thinks he's in.
The room you just created?
Right, but this is not the actual room because that's going to be a real value. We really need to know the index because as soon as we garbage collect our room object, the player's pointer might not go to a real place. And since we're going to need to know the index anyway.
Yeah, just before you take the snapshot, just index.
Well, but it's not public right now. We need to go and make his, oh, we do, it is public. Current room index. Yeah, that's all we need. So we don't even need to do it before the snapshot. Instead of saying get current room, we'll say dot, was it current room index? If that guy is not equal to, or if it is equal to -1, that means he, well, no. If it's not equal to -1, that means he's in a real room. Otherwise, he must go to the base room. So then we'll say core.thedungeon dot find, well, that goes one way. So we need to get the room given an index. So we'll go into dungeon. We need to add an ability. So we have one ability that says find index of room. Now we need to have an ability to either add a player to a room index or get the index of or get the room given an index. Both of those might actually be helpful functions. It might be helpful for us to be able to say, hey, I need the room that's index 7. Or, hey, I want to add the player to this room. Maybe right now we only need to add the player to a specific room. So we'll say public void add player, player P, int room index. And we'll say this dot rooms dot get room index dot add player, and the player will add as P. So that should add the player to the room given an index instead of just adding the player to the start room. So now we'll be able to say this dot add player, and we're going to give it this one, what player core dot P, what index core dot P dot current room index. That's if he's going to a room that is something other than -1. If it's currently -1, that means the game just started, and we'll go ahead and toss him in the start room. So this change here should now mean when we hit save, he won't move. He should still be in his original place. All right, so we'll go to, here's our CS hallway. So this is kind of in the middle there. So let's add an exit. We actually don't need to add an exit, but we'll do CS entrance. And that's going to be to the east from there. We'll hit save. We'll test it. We're in the CS entrance. All right, we're going to say we're happy. I'll go ahead and hit save. We're still in CS hallway, but hopefully it's updated our room to be the new room pointer, so I can still move throughout the department now. Pretty good. All right, so now we need to be able to add an NPC. So we have this ability to add an exit. Now we need to be able to add an NPC to a room. I'm almost thinking now it might make sense for us to do this add exit button kind of above the name of the room, because now we're adding another button for adding an NPC, right? So let's go into our activity main. That's that linear layout. I'm going to throw another horizontal linear layout up here. And I'm going to make this guy's height wrap content. And I'll go ahead and throw my add exit button up there. So it's above that guy. Then I'm going to throw another button up there for add NPC. All right, there's our add NPC. All right, and then let's get that button wired up to something. Public void add NPC button pressed. Like this. All right, and that guy is going to probably send us to a new screen. That's going to be our add NPC screen. Right now, NPCs just have names, but we might expand what our NPCs can do in the future. Maybe we give them like stats and stuff like that. You know, we obviously want this to be ready for full Steam release. Right? That's not your plan?
Green light.
You don't want to release? Yeah, well, they don't even call it green light anymore.
Really?
I think so. They changed now that everything falls underneath the same category.
Early access.
Yeah, well, no, anybody can now, as long as you're willing to drop $100.
1,000
Oh.
now.
They up to date to 1,000?
Yeah, that's the thing, because Greenlight was letting a lot of less than stellar products through, so they said, okay, we need to make sure you're really committed to it. So it's $1,000, and then I
When did that change?
think that was like last year.
No, it's 100. That's the timing. They were really debating. They were debating on a number between 100 and 5,000. They were going back between all these numbers. And in the end, they settled on, unless they changed the number from 100 to 1,000 at some point. But I put a game up there in, it must have been in January,
Give me a key.
and it was $100 to establish it. And you actually get the $100 back from when you first make $100 off with your cuts from it. Same thing would be true for the 1,000, but I remember there was a big article that came out that was, we were debating whether to make it, like 100 or 500 or 1,000 or even as much as 5,000. And we decided to not alienate our startup company developers who maybe couldn't drop the 1,000 or 5,000 to make it 100. So there was a barrier where, some kid couldn't just, wouldn't just throw the stupid app up there for $100 because now it's costing them $100. But the barrier was low enough to, it could be wrong, but I mean, I have an app up there that cost me $100 to put it up there.
Yeah. I guess I didn't see the news.
I mean, they did explain there was a whole big rationale where they were thinking about 1,000 or thinking about 5,000 and all that stuff. And in the end, they landed on 100, which a lot of people were happy about.
Yeah.
As just that kind of minimum barrier to keep the stupid app from, like, look, if you really want to spend $100 to put an app up there, it isn't going to sell. More power to you. that.
They just uploaded the green light.
So the way Greenlight worked is you could apply, because Greenlight didn't cost you anything.
Yeah.
So the way it worked is you put your app up there, and they decided whether it would go or not. And then it didn't cost you anything to get on there. Well, so what happened is there was a lot of people who avoided the Steam store because there was that barrier where your app that you just spent a bunch of time on might get voted down and not allowed onto the store. So now they made the process of getting onto the store simpler. If you'll put $100, we'll put you on the store, and we'll even give you the $100 back if your app sells. If it doesn't sell, you're out $100. That's the scoop. But now you don't have to worry about that voting process. But instead, you're saying, I think it's good enough that it's worth $100 to throw up there, something like that. Yeah. So I think Greenlight doesn't exist anymore. They might have kind of a almost an incubator type program where they might be working on something like that with the whole entrepreneurial type stuff, where they might say, if you think you have a really good idea, you can submit it to this and maybe we will partner with you or something like that and promote it, whatever. There might be something along those lines. But I think Greenlight got replaced with this more streamlined, give us money, we'll put your app up.
So the new form is called Steam Direct, if you want to look it up.
Yeah. That's the $100 thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The department will pay the money. Yeah, right.
For this one? Oh yeah, no problem. I mean, this one, we're going to make our $100 back in a heartbeat.
It doesn't even support Android apps.
I mean, look at the slick user interface. I mean, this button's now moved. I mean, this is under active development. This is an active development type of product at this point. Right, Charlie? Even Charlie can't make eye contact at this point. Like, don't spend your $100 on this. He says it's not worth it. It's not worth it. All right. That's right. I'll put $100 into this. Put it up there. It'll at least be a good joke, right? Just $100. I mean, I gave the guy at my golf course yesterday who cleans the clubs at the end, gave him $100. Guarantee my clubs will always be clean. I guarantee my clubs will always be in a cart and parked out there ready for me whenever I show up. Money well spent. None of the other riffraff to give him $1.
We'll bend it.
What's up?
We'll bend it. We don't do 100.
No, he's actually a pretty good guy. I don't think he would. But he definitely appreciated the money. Buy him gas for a couple of months maybe, or at least 8 months with the price of gas right now.
I have to get gas again this weekend, and I'm like,
You're like dreading getting like
I
this
know.
weekend. When was the last time you got gas?
so long ago. Like, I drive a lot, but I get really good gas mileage, so it's been probably since spring break.
That sounds like my wife.
Or
My
Easter.
wife doesn't drive that much, and she has like a Honda Fit, which gets, I don't know, 4 million miles per gallon or something. You know, maybe it's a little better than that. I don't know. So she doesn't get gas that often, but you know, sometimes I'm filling up. I'm filling up every week, at least once a week. Sometimes more than that per week. So I do a lot of trips and I schlep people places and stuff like that. I'm always going down to Milwaukee for meetings and
Well,
And I don't-
Milwaukee at least twice a week.
well, I don't get what kind of gas mileage do you get? Like 50 miles a gallon?
I have no idea.
You just know it's good.
Yeah.
What kind of car is it?
When it's a Hyundai Sonata.
Honda
When
Sonata.
I fill up, I can.
So it's like a 4-door. You probably, what do you put, like 12 gallons in it when you fill up?
More than that.
Oh, so you have a bigger tank. I don't think
Not
you
much.
probably get like 28 miles per gallon.
What's your full? Like how much you?
That's why I just asked
It's
her.
been so long. I don't
She
even
just said
remember.
more than 12. That's it.
Not that much more than 12.
No, more than 12 gallons.
No, how much you spend?
40.
40 bucks, yeah?
Yeah, it's like 14 gallons.
Yeah.
14 gallons.
So I'm guessing you get like 28 miles per gallon. That's not like amazing gas mileage. That's like good. That's good gas mileage.
You go Navy down and do 4
Yeah.
for 5 hours.
I mean, my wife gets. I think she legitimately, when she's on the interstate, gets like 65 miles per gallon. Well, she just drives it to Myers and she drives it to church. Those are her places.
Does she work from home?
Huh? Yeah, she's a programmer at home.
Does she like that?
Well, when I left Western Illinois University to come here, she kept her job there. She worked at the university, so she's still an Illinois State employee. So I guess the short answer is yes, she likes it. She probably likes it less than she used to because her longtime boss retired. New boss is okay. She's been friends with him for years, but she really liked the previous boss. In the state of Illinois, has no money, so. You know, she had to take furlough days last year. They seem to be a little healthier right now. I think they have a new set of corrupt politicians in there. I think that's an interesting statistic. I think, isn't it something like 3 of the last 5 or last 6 Illinois governors are in prison? I think it's not a made up thing.
Yes, but how many should be in prison?
No, hey, that's fair. How many politicians from across the states probably have done something that probably should have them in prison? But I wouldn't want the job, so.
What I was thinking about gas though is like the gas that I have in my car right now, it was like at least 20 cents cheaper than it is now.
And you worry about the 20 cents. It's like a big deal.
Yeah.
Man.
My fuel rewards only saves me 5 cents a gallon.
I don't even look at what the price of gas is when I pull in there. It's like, I need it. It's not like I'm going to turn around and leave.
Back home is cheaper than water.
What gas is?
Yeah.
In Saudi?
Yeah, but then right now it went up. It's almost equal to the States right now.
Well, but also in Saudi Arabia, you're buying it per liter, right?
Yeah.
But so the math works out.
Well, not really. It was literally dirt cheap. Like $5 will fill up the tank.
Well, I guess that's true because the oil is coming from down the street. Yeah. They don't have to refine it.
It's literally
There's just a
cheaper
pipe.
than water. And the water is more expensive
Because you're in a desert. Yeah, that's interesting. We were on what island were we on? I think it's the most expensive gas in the world, or right up there, like top 2 or 3. Was it Barbados? I think it was Barbados, which is off the coast of South America. We were there in January, and they sold it per liter, but I think the math came out to gas was something like $21 a gallon, or something like that. See, at least you don't have that.
I
Be
know.
thankful for your 20-cent hike.
It's also cheaper in Minnesota.
Don't live in California, it's like $4 there.
For gas?
Yeah.
Yeah, the salaries are higher. Probably.
Well, I
Also
don't
costs
have
more
a
to live,
salary
though.
when I was there.
And he was used to drinking gasoline because it was cheaper than the water. I mean, you build up a tolerance. All right, let's get our ad NPC button on here. Now that's a funny transition. The comment is drinking gasoline, you build up a tolerance. Let's get back to adding NPCs. That's a pretty hard U-turn. Even I'm impressed by that. All right, so we have our button here. Let's go ahead and hook it up, and then let's build our second activity for this dude. I'm lost. I need to go to activity main, add NPC. All right, and we'll call this guy new NPC activity to kind of keep with our naming convention. New activity, empty activity. New NPC activity. Finish. All right. And here's our new NPC activity. Let's just make sure this guy is a thing. I'll throw a little text view out there that just says text view right now. And we'll go back to main activity. We're going to create an intent. I is equal to a new intent. Passing it this. And what else does it take? Does it take the activity, the pointer to it? So NPC or new NPC activity dot class. Is that right? And then we say this dot start activity I. So let's make sure that button takes us to our new screen that has nothing on it. All right, there we are. All right, so now let's go create our NPC screen. All right, let's get rid of this dude. Let's add my vertical linear layout, because that's the only way I can make reasonable looking interfaces. Okay, so we're going to have a name. What else do NPCs have? Is it literally just a name? Because that's our character dealy, right?
And the current room would probably be the one that you already clicked on the button.
Yeah. So all a NPC has is a name. All right, simple enough. So we'll put in our label here. We'll do something similar to what we did before where we said name. In fact, I'm going to do this. Oh, it's gone. Let's go down to my resources, my layouts, my new room. I'm going to just steal these two guys. And then I'll go to my new NPC and I'll just paste those guys in there. Ha, except now it's not room name. It is NPC name. And this is enter NPC name, and we'll call this guy NPC name edit text like this. Then we need to give ourselves a save button. Where's my buttons? So there's save. Who?
Can I ask a general question?
Yeah.
So if you wanted to put that save button on the bottom, would you just change the gravity? Or like how?
You would have to do it a little funky here. So if you change the gravity, you can't change the gravity of this button because that'll make save down at the bottom of this thing here. What you could do is you would put another layout. So I would create another, I think will vertical do it? I think vertical let me do it. I might need to do one of these other ones, but let's try it with vertical. So I'll put a vertical linear layout there. I will set his gravity to bottom. And then I'll drop this button in there. It worked. Right. So upload the update. Yeah, and also that required that for your linear layout, you had to have the height match the parent. That way, otherwise, if it wrapped content, if I just change that one thing to wrap content, it all sucked back up. It's technically at the bottom of something that's the exact height of the button. All right. So let's give ourselves a thing for that save button. Void save button pressed. Okay. And then hook that up. On click, save button pressed. Back in here. Give myself access to a couple of things in here. So I want to have access to the name text, edit text, this guy right here, which is called NPC name edit text. So we're going to have private edit text NPC name ET, and inside of here we'll say this dot NPC name NT blah blah edit text. This dot find view by ID r dot ID dot NPC name edit text like that. So now we have access to that guy. Now when we actually go to create a character or created NPC, we need a name. We also need the current room index. How do we get the current room index into this particular new, because we're going to be in a room, right? So back here, we're in some room. We're going to hit a button that says add NPC. This room is the room we want to add this NPC to, correct? All right, so how do I get the index of this room over to this screen? Can certainly do that. That's actually a pretty good idea. Instead of passing, so one thing we could do is we can find out what's the index of this room, right? But since we're always doing these things from the player's perspective, like we're in this room because the player is in this room. And since the player is in this room, when we click add NPC, we're adding this NPC into the current room index that the player's in. So from this guy's perspective. That is, how do we access the player? Core. So core.p is where our player currently lives. Dot current room index. So that's where we are placing our NPC. So we're gonna, let me steal this guy real quick. So we'll go ahead and ask our question. If this dot NPC name edit text dot get text dot toString dot length, if the length is equal to 0, let's make some toast. That's my favorite part. Actually, my favorite part's when he speaks French right before that. I'm not even sure it's real French, but then then he says French toast. So toast.makeText, context is this. Hey, that's like super convenient.
Yeah.
Is that a new thing?
Did you hit tab or enter?
I don't know, I hit something.
I think tab. Usually.
Yeah, it's very handy. Enter everything. All right. Else, that means they must have filled in the NPC name. So we're going to create an NPC. Temp is equal to a new NPC. I just hit tab. That doesn't give me the... I know.
Non-built-in function. Only built-in.
Well, it's not fun. Okay, so I got to give it the name, and then I have to explicitly set its current room index. Now I could, though, give myself a public NPC string name int current room index and set this dot name equal to name, this dot current room index is equal to current room index. So now I can have a constructor for my purposes, right? That, well, I already have, this is one constructor for my purpose. Here's another constructor for my purpose. This is the constructor for Firebase's purpose. All right, so this one will allow me to create a name along with the room index that I want to put him in. Oh, I've lost again. No, this one. So I'll pass this guy the name, which is this dude. And then the room that we want to put him in, which is current room index of the player. All right, so now we want to add this guy to that room. How do we add him to the room? So if we go to rooms, rooms have add NPC. Here's add NPC. We pass to the NPC we want to add, so we need to get the player's room. How do we get the player's room? Now we have his room index.
You have that function. Give an index
Yep.
and get you
So in our dungeon, we have a, we can get the find index of a room. But now I need the room given an index, which was the function I said might be handy about 20 or 30 minutes ago. So we can say public room find room with index int index, and this guy will return. We can presume he's going to pass us a real room. So you say this dot rooms dot get index. All right, and then our dungeon lives in core. So from in here, we can say core dot the dungeon dot find room with index. What index? Core p dot current room index. So that's going to give me a room. So let's store this. So we'll say room, the room. So now I have a room. And then I want to say the room dot add NPC temp. So then he'll be added there. So let's go ahead and then we can say this dot finish. That'll finish this activity for right now. All right. Now, when it takes us back there, are we going to see the updated NPC? Why? Yeah, we kind of need to do a fill interface, right? But when does our fill interface happen right now?
Well, whenever the database updates.
Ah, when we hit it, when we write it to the database. That's when it actually happens. So let's just make sure this runs. That way I can give you this as your starting point for your homework. Should not be hard homework, but it'll test whether you understand all the stuff we've done up to this point. So right now I should be able to go in. I should be able to add an NPC. Just call him LOL. Hit save. It goes back here. I expected to see a new NPC in here, but I did not. We can call fill interface directly, and it'll, show our NPC there. But right now, our fill interface only gets called upon the database getting updated, which then calls back to our program, letting us know that the dungeon's been updated. That make sense? So you have to update the database with our now changed dungeon. And then when you come back here, you should see that our NPCs are now in place and saved. So that when you start the game again, you should see that it also has the NPC in that room. All right, then next time we'll talk about threads to make these NPCs move around some. Sound good? All right, so I'll put that up on Blackboard. I'll push this to GitHub, and I will see everybody on Tuesday. Remember, I have the extra credit opportunity up on Slack for next week's senior seminar presentations, Tuesday and Thursday night from 5 to 8 p.m. You get 1% extra credit on your final exam for each presentation you attend. I think is there a total of 10 presentations or 11, something like that? Whatever it is, you can get up to 10, 11, 12%, however many presentations there are if you attend them all. If you attend 2 or 3, whatever. So anyways, that information is up on Slack, as well as the individual presentations, what they are, who's doing it, and what time they start roughly. Plan on them kind of getting off by 5 or 10 minutes here and there. So, if you're on a really, really, really tight schedule, it might not make sense, but give yourself a 15-minute buffer on either side or something like that. Cool? All right, there. Took another minute away. All right, I will see everybody on Tuesday.